Okay, so this is the video to show you how your test should have been done for the data distribution. So it says right here, the table shows that the top teens for the NFC and the AFC, it says right here, complete a box and whisker plot for each conference. Each means both. I have one conference here, one conference here, so therefore I have to separate them. Keep them separated, do not put them together. In order to find all of our information, we need to put these in order from least to greatest, so I did that. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of data. So I need to find all of my data when it comes to like the lowest quartile, the upper quartile, and the median. I have to find the median first. So therefore, I start on the ends and I count in. So here, here, and here. So in the middle is 86. That is my median. So therefore, this is going to be my lower quartile, or my lower half of the data, and that's going to be my upper half of the data. So I need to find the lower quartile, and 68 is in the middle. And then on my right hand side, 113 is my middle. So I have my lower quartile here, I have my median here, and I have my upper quartile for the NFC. Now, a couple of things that we need for the box and whisker plots are your minimum and maximums. This is your minimum, this is your maximum, but we do have to check for outliers. So we need to take and find the IQR. Remember, your IQR is your upper quartile minus your lower quartile. And so my upper quartile is 113. My lower quartile is 68. So 113 minus 68 is 45. To find the outlier, we have to take this number and multiply it by 1.5. So when I do that, I get 67.5. Now what I have to do is I have to subtract that from my lower quartile and add it to this. So I have to take 68 minus 67.5, which is only a half. So my question is do I have anything smaller than a half on here? And the answer is no. So this is not an outlier. This is your minimum. Okay? Next, I have to take this same number, the 67.5, and add it to my upper quartile. So 113 plus 67.5 is 180.5. Do I have anything higher than 180 on here? And the answer is no. So this is not an outlier. So this is your maximum. Okay? You also need to find your mean and your range. So you need to get out a calculator and we need to add all of these numbers up here. Remember, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 pieces of data. So I'm going to take 59 plus 68 plus 77 plus 86 plus 104 plus 113 plus 137 on my calculator. And we get 644. Okay? So mean 644, and we need to divide that by 7 because we have a total of 7 numbers that we added up. So divided by 7, and you should get 92. One other thing that we need to find is the range. Range is your high value minus your low value. So we're going to take 137 minus 59 and get 78. Okay, so I told you guys that you needed to find your mean, you needed to find the median, you needed to find the range, and you needed to find the distribution of your box and whisker plot. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pause this and do the same thing for the AFC. Okay, so I'm back. I went ahead and found my important information, my lower quartile, my median, my upper quartile. I then found my inner quartile range by taking 94 and subtracting 76, so I got 18. 18 times 1.5 is 27. So again, you take your lower quartile, you minus that, and you ask yourself, do I have anything lower than this? And the answer is no. So this is my minimum. Same thing, take that 27, add it to your upper quartile, and I got 121. So I don't have anything higher than 121, so this is my maximum. I found the mean by adding all these numbers up and dividing by 7, and I got 84.4. Found the range, and I got that by taking 114 and subtracting 67. The next thing we need to do is we need to graph our box and whisker plots. Now please remember, a box and whisker plot is created by the minimum. Here is your whisker. That's the minimum value. This is your maximum value. This is your lower quartile. That is your upper quartile. And that bar in the middle is our median. So these are the things that you need to do a box and whisker plot, and we have all of those things right up here. We have our minimum, we have our lower quartile, median, upper quartile, and our maximum for both of these. So these numbers are spread out between about 59 to 137. So we need to go to some bigger numbers. So I really recommend that you either count by 5s or you count by 10s. So the number line I created is going by 10s. Okay, so here's my number line. Notice that it starts at 60 and goes all the way to 140. Now, what we could do is, since this number line ends right there, you can extend that line a little bit. Okay, so we're going to graph these. Please make sure that when you graph these that you label them. Okay, so the first one I'm going to graph is the NFC here. Okay, so I'm going to graph these 3 circled numbers first. Those give me my box. These give me my whiskers. So first thing I'm going to graph is my lower quartile, which is 68. So I'm going to come down here, and this is about 68 here. Make a line. Next one, 86. So here's 80, here's 85, so 86 is about right there. Next one, 113. So here's 100, here's 110, here's 115, so 113 is about in the middle. Now when you have those 3 lines, you need to connect your lines. A little bit hard to do while holding the phone. Pretend that's not curved. Okay. My minimum is 59. So I'm going to graph that right under 60, connect my line. My maximum is 137, so I'm going to go all the way out here. So here's 135. 137 is about in the middle. Connect the line. This is my box and whisker for the NFC. What I'm going to do is put it on pause and graph the next one. Okay, so I went ahead and graphed the other box and whisker plot here for the AFC using my lower quartile, median, and upper quartile, my minimum, and my maximum. Okay, so we have those down. So to get started, we need to compare and contrast our data. You need to mention again the mean, the median, the range, and the distribution of the data. I don't care where you start as long as you mention that. A lot of people started with the box and whisker plots, and they talked about the distribution of the data. So if we look here, a lot of you guys had already said that the NFC is more spread out, and I totally agree with you on that. Okay? So why is it more spread out? It is more wider. What makes it wide? And the answer to that question is range. It has a bigger range. Okay? So if you're going to talk about the distribution of the data, you need to back it up with numbers. Justify your answers with the data. Okay? So if we're going to talk about the distribution of the data, we need to talk about that using the range. Okay? And we know that the ranges are different. The range for the NFC was 78, and the range for AFC was 47. So we need to talk about that. Okay? So I'm going to write a sentence talking about the distribution of the data and backing it up with the information from the range. I'm going to again put it on pause and come back to show you what I have. Okay, so here I'm talking about the distribution of the data. So it says the distribution of the data for the NFC's penalties. Remember, we're talking about penalties. We're not talking about points. We're not talking about scores. These are penalties. Okay, is wider than that of the AFC. Says this can also be seen by looking at their range, which shows a difference of 31 penalties. So we can then say that overall the NFC has a much wider range of penalties than the AFC. Okay? So that's a conclusion statement that you can write just from that it has a wider range than the AFC. The next thing we're going to look at is the medians. If you look here, they're kind of in the same area. They're somewhat close to each other. If we look at the data is 86 and 80. Those are somewhat close to each other, so you can mention that the middle of the data, the middle of the penalties for each team is about 80 to 86. So very close, low to mid 80 penalties. So I'm going to go ahead and add that on there. Okay, so I went ahead and added that sentence in there. The median of both team penalties are in the low to mid 80s. Okay. The next thing we're going to mention is the mean right here. So mean is 92 and 84. Okay. So remember, mean is average. So on average, the NFC has 92 penalties in a season, and on average, the AFC has 84 penalties a season. So we need to come up with a sentence that talks about that. You can either mention both of them. You could talk about the difference between them, but we need to mention the data about the mean and the average, and then come up with a conclusion statement or something that talks about what that means. Okay, so you could say that the other one has a higher average and then list them out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the difference between these two. So 92 minus about 84, okay, is 8. So what you could say is on average, the NFC has 8 more penalties than the AFC. Okay, so notice that we're mentioning the average, that we're talking about the data, that we use the data to find out the difference between the two, and then we're coming up with a conclusion statement together in one sentence. So on average, the NFC has 8 more penalties than the AFC. So I'm going to write that down. Okay, so again, on average, the NFC has 8 more penalties in a season than the AFC. Okay, so we have mentioned the distribution, we have talked about the range, we have talked about the median, and we have talked about the average. So we have included both measures of center variation, or measures of center tendencies, and measures of variation. All the things that are needed for this learning target that we are completing. So you need a conclusion statement. So this is where you would put the sentence that says, in conclusion, okay, what conclusion could you come up with? So one thing that we could definitely say is, on average, the NFC does have more penalties than the AFC. And we could almost say that by 25%, because remember, each of these represents 25%. 25, 25, 25, and 25. It's not exactly 25, okay? So we could say about 25 or less than 25. But you could sit here and say that the NFC on average, or not on average, but that 25% of the penalties are greater than the AFC. And again, we're using our percentages. You could also say that just the NFC overall has more penalties than the AFC. And you've already supported that data or that conclusion with this data right down here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there about the 25% here. All right, so there's my conclusion statement. So in conclusion, the NFC's penalties are greater than the AFC, but less than by less than 25%. Okay. So again, a lot of work, but it is, again, stuff that we have done is just putting it down into sentences and talking about the data correctly and using labels and coming up with those conclusion sentences. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.